In Paris, in December 2018, Luka Modrić walked toward a stage holding the prize that had belonged to only two men for the previous decade. For 10 straight years, the Ballon d'Or had gone to Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. Then, a different name was called, Luka Modrić. By then, the world knew the image, the long hair, the narrow frame, the number 10. The midfielder constantly turning his head, scanning the field before the ball had even reached him. He had already won the Champions League 4 times with Real Madrid. He had just captained Croatia to the first World Cup final in the country's history, and now he was holding football's most famous individual award. But the story of how he reached that room begins in a place that looked nothing like it. Not Madrid, not Moscow, not Paris. A hotel. During the war in Croatia, Modric's family was displaced from its home and eventually lived in refugee accommodation in Zadar. Around the hotel, rough tarmac could become a football pitch. Simple objects could become goalposts. People who knew him at the time later remembered a young Modric constantly playing football, even in the corridors. The ball was something a child could understand when much of the adult world around him made no sense. The distance between those two places, a refugee hotel and the Ballon d'Or stage, is the distance of Luka Modric's life, and it was not crossed in one miraculous leap. It was crossed through displacement, loss, uncertainty, loans, rejection, England, Madrid, missed penalties, European finals, a World Cup, and a question that seemed to follow him almost everywhere he went. Was he really strong enough for this? For much of Luka Modric's career, people looked at what he lacked. By the end, they were studying everything he could do. Luka Modrić was born in Zadar on September 9th, 1985. His earliest years were closely connected to his family's rural environment near the Velebit Mountains. It was a very different world from the stadiums that would later define his life. There were no Champions League nights, no transfer stories, no global awards. Only family, countryside, childhood routines, and the beginnings of a relationship with a football. One of the most important figures in those early years was his grandfather. He was also named Luka. Modric would later remember him as a protector and as a man who occupied a large place in his earliest memories. Then the world around the family changed. In 1991, war spread through Croatia. Modric was still a child. In December that year, his grandfather was killed. The family fled. There is no useful way to turn that into a motivational story. A child losing a family member during war is not a gift. Displacement is not training. Trauma does not come with a promise that something extraordinary will eventually grow from it. The Modric family was trying to survive a reality they had not chosen. Their displacement did not follow the clean line that biographies sometimes create afterward. For a period, the family found refuge in Makarska. Then, in the spring of 1992, they moved to Zadar. There, Hotel Kolovare became an improvised home. A hotel is designed for people who know when they are leaving. For displaced families, that certainty did not exist. Rooms meant for temporary guests became living spaces. Corridors became part of everyday life. Outside, the city lived with the realities of war. Sirens could interrupt normal routines. Shelling could force people toward shelter. The adults understood the danger in ways a young child could not fully process. But a ball gave the day structure. Modric later remembered playing football around the hotel environment, including on hard surfaces where simple objects could become goalposts. There was no perfect grass pitch, no elite academy, no expensive training equipment. There only needed to be enough room for a ball. That does not mean football erased the war. It did not. But for a child, it could create a temporary boundary around the world. For a few minutes, there was a ball to control, someone to dribble past, a space to reach, a goal to score. People connected to football in Zadar would later remember hearing about the unusually persistent little boy who seemed to play wherever he could, including in the hotel corridors. Whether outside on hard ground or inside where space allowed, the important part was the repetition. Football was always there. And eventually, people began to notice what the boy could do with it. He entered the youth environment around NK Zadar. Organized football changed the scale of the challenge. Now there were coaches, teammates, training sessions, opponents, expectations. But the basic relationship remained familiar. The ball arrived. Modric had to decide what to do before someone took it away. That became one of the central patterns of his career. He did not grow into the biggest player. He learned to make size less important. In the summer of 1998, Croatia appeared at the World Cup as an independent nation for the first time. A young Modric followed the tournament from Zadar. Croatia went all the way to the semi-final and eventually finished third. For a young footballer growing up in a country that had only recently emerged from war, those players represented something new. Croatian footballers were standing on the world's biggest stage. Modric was still far from becoming one of them, but the possibility existed. The next question was whether he could become good enough to reach it. Talent does not remove uncertainty. Sometimes it creates a new kind of it. As Modric moved through youth football, one detail was impossible to ignore. He was slight. In an era when young players were often judged quickly on physical development, his body could make people hesitate before his football had time to answer. Hajduk Split had the opportunity to bring him into its system and passed. That later became part of a much larger legend in which Modric was supposedly rejected everywhere because he was too small. The reality is less dramatic and more interesting. Not everyone rejected him. Some people saw enough to continue investing in him. Dinamo Zagreb was one of them. Moving toward Croatia's most powerful club was a major step, but joining Dinamo did not mean Modric was immediately ready to dominate its first team. The prospect needed something else: senior football. In the 2003-04 season, still a teenager, Modric went on loan to Zrinjski Mostar. By the end of that campaign, he had been named Player of the Season in Bosnia and Herzegovina at 18. The importance of the loan went beyond an award. Mostar gave him an environment where the physical question could no longer remain theoretical. Youth football gives talented players moments in which technique can create time. Senior football removes those moments quickly. The opponent is stronger. The contact arrives sooner. Space closes faster. A player who waits until the ball reaches him is already late. For Modric, the solution was not to become physically larger overnight. It was to become quicker in the moments before contact. Look earlier. Open the body. Know where the pressure is coming from. Take the first touch away from it. Make the opponent's strength arrive at a place where the ball no longer exists. Zrinjski did not make him bigger. It forced him to become more efficient. He learned. And the season supplied an important answer. The small midfielder could survive senior football. More than survive it. He could influence it. But Dinamo still did not rush him directly into the center of its first team. Another loan followed, this time to Inter Zapršić. Again, the move could have been interpreted as evidence that Modric was not ready. Instead, it became another stage of development. He played. He gained responsibility. Inter challenged near the top of the Croatian league, and Modric's reputation continued to grow. By the end of the 2004-05 season, he had received recognition as Croatia's Young Player of the Year. The pattern was becoming clearer. The loans were not detours from his development. They were the development. When he returned to Dinamo, he was no longer simply a talented academy player waiting for an opportunity. He had experienced senior football in different environments. He had been physically tested. He had learned to receive under pressure. He had learned how quickly professional matches punished hesitation. Now Dinamo had a midfielder ready to matter. Over the next seasons, Modric became increasingly central to the team. The qualities that would later define him internationally were becoming visible. He could drop toward defenders and help move the ball forward. He could receive with an opponent close behind him. He could turn into spaces that appeared to be closed. He could carry possession through midfield without needing to overpower anyone. And perhaps most importantly, he was learning to see the next action early. Football can create the illusion that certain players have more time than everyone else. Usually, they do not. They have learned to begin thinking sooner. Modric was becoming one of those players. That development soon carried him into the Croatian national team. On March 1st, 2006, Croatia played Argentina in a friendly. Modric made his senior international debut. Croatia won 3-2. Within months, he was part of the country's World Cup squad in Germany. Later that year, against Italy, he scored his first senior international goal as Croatia won 2-0. National team coach Slaven Bilic openly praised his potential. The small midfielder who had been sent away on loan was now playing against some of the most famous football nations in the world. A few years earlier, the question had been whether he was physically ready for professional football. Zrinjski gave one answer, Inter Zapršić gave another, Dinamo gave another. Croatia was now providing the strongest evidence yet. And Europe was beginning to pay attention. By the beginning of 2008, Luka Modrić was no longer an unknown prospect in Croatia. He had become one of Dinamo Zagreb's most important players. He was a regular international. And Croatia had just completed one of the most memorable qualification campaigns in its recent history. In November 2007, Croatia traveled to Wembley to face England. Croatia had already secured qualification for the European Championship. England still needed the result. The pressure belonged to the home side. Croatia won 3-2. England were eliminated. For the players who had watched the 1998 generation as children, this Croatian side was developing its own identity. Modric was at the center of it, and clubs outside Croatia were watching. Before the European Championship even began, Tottenham Hotspur moved. On April 29, 2008, Tottenham announced an agreement to sign Luka Modrić from Dinamo Zagreb. The reported consideration was €21 million. The timing matters. Tottenham did not sign him because of what he would do at Euro 2008. The deal had already been agreed. The tournament showed the rest of Europe why. Croatia opened against co-host Austria in Vienna. Only minutes into the match, Croatia were awarded a penalty. Modric stepped forward. He scored. Croatia won 1-0. The second match brought Germany. This was a much larger test. Germany had reached the semifinals of the previous World Cup and entered the tournament among the favorites. Croatia beat them 2-1. Modric was at the heart of the midfield performance. By the end of the group stage, Croatia had won all 3 matches. For a team outside the traditional group of European superpowers, the tournament suddenly looked open. Then came Turkey in the quarterfinal. The match remained scoreless through 90 minutes. Extra time moved toward its end. In the final moments, Modric reached the ball near the byline and crossed for Ivan Klasnić. Klasnić scored. Croatia believed it had won. The bench erupted. The players could almost see the semifinal. Then Turkey equalized. Almost immediately, the match went to penalties. Modric took Croatia's first. He missed. Croatia missed again. Turkey won the shootout. A tournament that had felt like a breakthrough ended in a few brutal minutes. That moment would return to Modric's story 10 years later. Another major tournament. Another knockout match. Another penalty. Another opportunity to discover what happens after failure. But in 2008, there was only elimination. Even so, Modric's tournament had changed his status. UEFA selected him in its team of the tournament. He was the only Croatian included. And when the summer ended, England was waiting. The Premier League had seen small, technically brilliant midfielders before. But English football still carried a particular reputation. Speed. Contact. Second balls. Challenges from every direction. And as Modric arrived at Tottenham, the old question followed him into another country. Could a player built like that control matches here? When Luka Modric arrived at Tottenham in the summer of 2008, English football had already supplied the question waiting for him. Could he handle the Premier League? Tottenham had committed €21 million to bring him from Dinamo. But the player they had bought still looked, at first glance, smaller than many of the men around him. Modric himself expected the speed and intensity. What he could not fully know was how quickly the league would demand decisions. His first months were not simple. Tottenham began the 2008-09 league season badly. The team was searching for stability at the same moment its new midfielder was trying to understand his place inside it. Modric was used in different areas, at times from the left, at times higher behind an attacker, at times closer to the center. Each position changed the type of pressure he faced. Playing wider could give him more space. Playing higher could put him closer to goal. Playing centrally put him directly into the physical contest critics thought might overwhelm him. When Harry Redknapp took charge, the question continued. In January 2009, Redknapp used Modric in a more conventional central midfield role. It appeared to expose exactly what people doubted. Instead, it helped clarify what Modric's form of strength actually was. Strength in football is not only the ability to survive contact after it arrives. Sometimes it is the ability to make contact arrive too late. A half turn, a shoulder scan, a first touch into the correct space, a pass released before the defender can set his feet. Modric did not need to win every physical contest. He needed to control where those contests happened. Over time, Tottenham began to understand what it had. By the end of his first season, he looked less like a player trying to adapt to English football and more like someone the team could build around. The following season pushed that development further. Tottenham chased a place among the Premier League's top 4. The structure around Modric changed as players such as Gareth Bale became increasingly important. The team's attacking threat grew, and Modric became one of the players linking its different parts. He did not dominate the scoreboard. His influence often appeared in what happened immediately after he touched the ball. Who had to move toward him? Which defender had been pulled out? What passing lane had opened? Which teammate now had space? In May 2010, Tottenham finished 4th. For the first time, the club had earned a route into the Champions League. Soon afterward, Modric signed a new 6-year contract. At 24, he was no longer an experiment. He'd become one of Tottenham's key players. The following season carried him onto a larger European stage. Tottenham's first Champions League group included Inter Milan, the defending European champions. At White Hart Lane, Tottenham beat Inter 3-1. The game became famous for Gareth Bale's threat from the left, but it also contained a sequence that captured Modric's value. He received under pressure, moved past it, and released a reverse pass into Rafael van der Vaart. Tottenham won the group. The run continued. AC Milan came next. Tottenham eliminated them 1-0 on aggregate. Then came Real Madrid. The quarterfinal ended heavily in Madrid's favor. At the Bernabeu, Tottenham were beaten 4-0 in the first leg. The tie finished 5-0 on aggregate. For Modric, the Bernabeu was still an opponent's stadium. Within 18 months, it would become home. That first Champions League season also changed how Tottenham were viewed. The club had not simply qualified. It had reached the last 8. Modric's influence was recognized inside the club as well. Tottenham later named him its player of the season for the 2010-11 campaign. The irony was complete. The player who had arrived with questions about whether he could survive English football had become a player Tottenham now feared losing. Chelsea tried to sign him in the summer of 2011. Tottenham chairman Daniel Levy publicly refused to sell. Modric remained. He played another season in England. But the direction of his career had changed. The Premier League had been a test. He had passed it. Now the next challenge was not whether he belonged at a bigger level. It was what would happen when he reached one of the biggest clubs in the world. In August 2012, Real Madrid called. After 4 years and 160 appearances for Tottenham, Luka Modric left England. He had arrived as a player many people thought might be too small for the league. He left as one of its leading playmakers. But at the Bernabeu, everyone has already been excellent somewhere else. The test begins again. On August 27, 2012, Real Madrid announced Luka Modric as a new player. The contract was for 5 years. The move placed him inside a dressing room with extraordinary competition. Cristiano Ronaldo, Mesut Ozil, Xabi Alonso, Sami Khedira, Kaká, and a manager, Jose Mourinho, whose teams were built around tactical discipline and relentless expectation. At Tottenham, Modric had become central to the team. At Real Madrid, nothing was guaranteed. 2 days after his presentation, he made his debut against Barcelona in the second leg of the Spanish Super Cup. He entered late. Madrid won the match and the trophy. It was an extraordinary way to begin. But the first months that followed were much less simple. Modric had joined near the end of the summer. There had been no normal preseason with the team. Madrid's midfield already had established roles. There were good performances. There were also matches in which his place in the team felt less certain. In November, he scored his first Real Madrid goal against Zaragoza. But the moment that most clearly changed the feeling around his first season came months later in England. Old Trafford, March 2013. Real Madrid were facing Manchester United in the Champions League. The tie was balanced. United moved ahead. Then Nani was sent off. Mourinho turned to Modric. He entered as a substitute with Madrid needing to change the match. Modric found space outside the penalty area. He shifted the ball, shot from distance. The ball struck the inside of the post and went in. Madrid were level. 3 minutes later, Cristiano Ronaldo scored. Madrid advanced. Afterward, Mourinho said Modric's introduction had changed the dynamic of the midfield. It was one match, one goal. But for Modric, it mattered. The new signing had produced a decisive Champions League moment in one of European football's most famous stadiums. The following season changed the context again. Carlo Ancelotti became manager. Modric's influence increased. He was no longer simply competing for a role. He was becoming one of the players through whom Madrid could control matches. The 2013-14 Champions League campaign provided the defining stage. Madrid moved through the group phase unbeaten. They eliminated Schalke. Then Borussia Dortmund. The semifinal brought Bayern Munich, the defending European champions. Madrid won the first leg 1-0. In Munich, the second leg became a statement. Early in the match, Modric walked toward the corner flag. He delivered from the right. Sergio Ramos headed Madrid in front. Ramos scored again minutes later. Cristiano Ronaldo added 2 more. Madrid won 4-0. For the first time since 2002, Real Madrid were going to the European Cup final. The opponent in Lisbon was Atletico Madrid, and the pressure carried a historical weight unique to Real. The club had won 9 European Cups. The 10th had become an obsession, La Decima. Atletico scored first. Diego Godin put them ahead in the first half. Then they defended. Minute after minute, Madrid attacked. Atletico resisted. The clock moved toward 90, then beyond it. For Madrid, another year without the 10th was almost real. Then they won a corner. Modric walked toward the right side. He placed the ball, looked into the area, and struck it. Sergio Ramos rose. Header. Goal. The 93rd minute. Real Madrid were alive. Extra time changed everything. Gareth Bale scored. Marcelo scored. Cristiano Ronaldo scored from the penalty spot. The final finished 4-1. La Decima was complete. For Modric, the assist was only one action in a season of work, but it became attached to one of the most famous goals in Real Madrid's modern history. A few years earlier, people had wondered whether he was strong enough for the Premier League, then whether he could become important at Real Madrid. By Lisbon, the question had changed again. At Madrid, survival was not enough. A player had to become necessary. Modric was getting there. And La Decima was only the beginning. Great teams are often remembered through their most visible moments. Goals, finals, trophies. But repeated success usually depends on structures that are less dramatic. At Real Madrid, one of those structures became the midfield built around Luka Modrić, Toni Kroos, and Casemiro. They were not three versions of the same player. That was the point. Casemiro could protect the space in front of the defense and absorb defensive responsibility. Kroos could control possession, dictate rhythm, and move the ball with extraordinary precision. Modric could connect different phases of the game. He could receive while pressured, escape, accelerate possession, carry it forward, or slow the match down when control mattered more than speed. Together, the three gave Madrid different solutions to different kinds of pressure. Modric's importance could still be difficult to measure through conventional highlights. Sometimes the best way to understand his influence was to watch the 10 seconds after he received possession. Which opponent had stepped forward? Which teammate had suddenly become free? What part of the field had changed? Elite midfield play often lives inside those small alterations. There were interruptions. Modric missed extended periods of the 2014-15 season through injury. A thigh problem kept him out for roughly 4 months, and after returning in March, a knee injury sidelined him again in April. Real Madrid's Champions League campaign eventually ended against Juventus in the semifinals, but Madrid returned. In 2016, they reached another Champions League final. Again, the opponent was Atletico. The match finished 1-1 after extra time. This time, the trophy was decided by penalties. Real Madrid won the shootout 5-3. Cristiano Ronaldo converted the final kick. Modric had his second Champions League title in 3 seasons. Then came 2017. Madrid faced Juventus in Cardiff. The teams went into halftime level at 1-1. In the second half, Madrid took control. Casemiro scored. Ronaldo scored again. Marco Asensio completed the result. Real Madrid won 4-1. And in doing so, they became the first club in the Champions League era to retain the trophy. Modric was named UEFA's Champions League Midfielder of the Season for 2016-17. The recognition reflected the thing that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. He was not simply present inside a great Real Madrid team. He was central to how it worked. 1 year later, Madrid returned to the final again. Paris Saint-Germain had been eliminated. Then Juventus. Then Bayern Munich. In Kiev, Liverpool waited. The final finished 3-1. Real Madrid had won the Champions League 3 years in succession. Modric had now won 4 European Cups with the club, including La Decima in 2014. And once again, UEFA named him the Champions League Midfielder of the Season. By this point, his club career had already reached a level that would have looked almost absurd from the beginning. The boy from Zadar had become part of one of the defining midfield units of his era. He had helped Real Madrid win Europe repeatedly. But an individual award, such as the Ballon d'Or, would require something more. Something that separated Modric's year from the accomplishments of the superstars around him. That summer, he went to Russia with Croatia, and the final act began. By the summer of 2018, Luka Modrić had already won almost everything club football could offer him. But with Croatia, the story felt unfinished. The generation around him was exceptional. Ivan Rakitic, Mario Mandzukic, Ivan Perisic, Marcelo Brozovic, Dejan Lovren, Šime Vrsaljko. Players established across some of Europe's biggest leagues. Yet Croatia had not gone beyond the first knockout round at a major tournament since the team that finished third at the 1998 World Cup. For Modric, that history was personal. He had followed 1998 as a young boy in Zadar. He had then lived through painful tournament exits as a player, including the penalty shootout defeat by Turkey at Euro 2008. Russia offered another chance. Croatia opened against Nigeria in Kaliningrad. The match was not spectacular, but it was controlled. Croatia won 2-0. Modric took the corner that helped produce the opening goal and then scored from the penalty spot. The second group match changed the tournament's perception of Croatia. Argentina arrived with Lionel Messi and the weight of expectation that follows one of world football's great nations. Croatia beat them 3-0. Ante Rebic scored first. Then, with the match still alive, Modric received the ball outside the area. He shifted it onto his right foot, created space, and struck low into the corner. The goal was beautiful. More importantly, the results showed that Croatia were no longer simply a talented side hoping to survive a difficult group. They had beaten one of the tournament's most recognizable teams by 3 goals. A2. One win over Iceland completed a perfect group phase. 3 matches, 3 victories. Croatia's tournament carried another layer. For 2 decades, the bronze medal team of 1998 had been the country's World Cup standard. Every talented Croatian generation that followed had been measured against it. Modric's generation had enough club pedigree to make the expectations uncomfortable. The question was no longer whether Croatia had famous names. The question was whether those names could survive a tournament together. That became especially important after the group stage. Knockout football strips away reputation. Against Denmark and Russia, Croatia were not producing 90 minutes of uninterrupted brilliance. They were being pushed into matches where exhaustion, mistakes, and nerve mattered as much as technique. Denmark. For most of the night in Nizhny Novgorod, the match seemed designed to exhaust everyone involved. Both teams scored inside the opening 4 minutes. Then the game tightened, 1-1 after 90 minutes, 1-1 deep into extra time. And in the 116th minute, Croatia were given the chance to end it. A penalty. Modric took the ball. 4 minutes remained. Score, and Croatia were almost certainly through. He struck it. Kasper Schmeichel saved. For a captain, the moment was brutal. The opportunity had been there, and Modric had missed. Only minutes later, the match went to a shootout. There was nowhere for him to hide from the same decision. Take another penalty, or allow the miss to decide what happened next. Modric stepped forward again. This time, he changed his finish. He scored. Croatia goalkeeper Danijel Subasic saved 3 Danish penalties. Ivan Rakitic converted the final kick. Croatia were through. The sequence became one of the defining moments of Modric's World Cup because it showed something more useful than perfection. He failed. Then, almost immediately, he had to perform the same action again. The quarterfinal brought the hosts, Russia, and another exhausting night. Russia scored first. Croatia equalized. Domagoj Vida put Croatia ahead in extra time. Mario Fernandes made it 2-2. Another shootout. Again, Modric walked toward the penalty spot. Again, he scored. Croatia won 4, 3 on penalties. They had now survived 2 knockout rounds, both beyond 120 minutes, both decided from the spot. The reward was a semi-final against England at the Luzhniki Stadium. 5 minutes into the match, Croatia were behind. Kieran Trippier curled a free kick into the top corner. England had the early advantage, but Croatia did not collapse. The match slowly changed. In the second half, Ivan Perisic reached Šime Vrsaljko's cross and equalized. The game went to extra time. For Croatia, it was their 3rd consecutive knockout match, requiring another 30 minutes. The physical cost was visible. Players stretched, cramped muscles. The tempo rose and fell. Yet Modric continued to drop toward the defense to receive the ball and then move forward again, helping Croatia keep possession when the match threatened to become only a contest of clearances and second balls. In the 109th minute, Perisic reacted first to a loose header and sent the ball into the area. Mario Mandzukic moved behind the defense, finished past Jordan Pickford. Croatia were ahead. When the final whistle arrived, Croatia had reached the World Cup final for the first time. Modric had already achieved something no Croatian captain before him had done. But one match remained. France. Moscow. July 15th, 2018. The final was open, dramatic and painful for Croatia. An own goal from Mandzukic put France ahead. Perisic equalized. Antoine Griezmann restored the French lead from the penalty spot. Then, in the second half, Paul Pogba and Kylian Mbappé stretched the score to 4-1. Mandzukic pulled one back. It finished France 4, Croatia 2. France were world champions. Croatia were not. There is a temptation in biographies to treat every major defeat as if it secretly counts as a victory. This one did not. Modric wanted the World Cup. He came closer than any Croatian player before him and still had to watch another captain lift it. Croatia could be proud of what it had done, but pride and disappointment can exist at the same time. Then came an individual recognition. FIFA's technical study group named Luka Modrić the Golden Ball winner as the best player of the tournament. He had scored twice, contributed an assist, controlled matches from midfield, and carried the responsibility of captaining Croatia through 3 consecutive extra-time knockout games. The Golden Ball did not replace the World Cup. Its meaning was different. For years, Modric's greatness had been easiest to understand inside a team. At Real Madrid, he was surrounded by global stars and functioned as part of a balanced midfield. In Russia, with Croatia's entire campaign under the world's attention, his individual influence was impossible to miss. That is why the 2018 World Cup matters so much to the larger Modric story. It put many of the qualities associated with his career under a different type of pressure: patience, awareness, technical security, recovery after mistakes, and the willingness to keep asking for possession when tired. The final created a strange split in the closing image of the tournament. France celebrated the trophy while Modric walked forward to receive the Golden Ball. He had been selected as the competition's outstanding player at almost exactly the moment he was confronting the largest defeat of his international career. That contradiction is important. Individual recognition had arrived. The result he wanted had not. The boy who had once watched Croatia's 1998 generation from Zadar had now captained a Croatian team one step further. He left Moscow without the trophy he wanted most. But he also left as the outstanding individual player of the World Cup. And when football's awards season began, voters were not judging one isolated match. They were looking at a year in which his club influence and international leadership had become visible at the same time. The awards started coming. The case for Luka Modrić in 2018 rested on 2 stages. With Real Madrid, he had helped win a 3rd consecutive Champions League title. With Croatia, he had captained his country to its first World Cup final and won the tournament's Golden Ball. The recognition began in August. UEFA named Modric its Men's Player of the Year for the 2017-18 season, ahead of Cristiano Ronaldo and Mohamed Salah. In September, Modric was named the best FIFA men's player, succeeding Cristiano Ronaldo, who had won the award's first 2 editions. Then came Paris, December 2018, the Ballon d'Or. France Football's list of winners showed just how unusual the moment was. From 2008 through 2017, the award had belonged to only 2 players: Cristiano Ronaldo, Lionel Messi, 10 consecutive years. 2018 broke the sequence. Luka Modrić was announced as the winner. It would be wrong to interpret that as a declaration that Messi and Ronaldo were suddenly finished. That was not what the vote proved. What it proved was narrower, and still remarkable. For 1 year, after a season built on Champions League success and an extraordinary World Cup run, enough voters looked beyond the 2 players who had dominated the award for a decade and placed Luka Modrić first. The object in his hands was gold. The journey behind it was anything but simple. And this is where the story can return to the beginning. Not to Madrid, not to Moscow, not even to Paris. Back to Zadar, back to the hotel, back to the image of a small boy with a football in a place his family never expected to call home. It would be easy to turn Luka Modric's life into a slogan. Suffering creates strength. Rejection creates champions. Believe, and everything works out. His story is more complicated than that. War took something from his family that football could never give back. Rejection did not guarantee success. Being small did not make him technically gifted. And no difficult childhood contains a promise of a Ballon d'Or at the end. What Modric did have was the ability to keep adapting without losing the qualities that made him different. Mastar asked him to survive senior football. He did. The Premier League asked whether his body could withstand its speed and physicality. He answered. Real Madrid asked whether an excellent player could become essential among superstars. He became part of a midfield that helped define an era. Croatia asked him to carry the responsibility of a captain through missed penalties, shootouts, extra time, and the pressure of a World Cup. He took them to the final. And then, in 2018, football gave him an individual prize that had seemed almost reserved for 2 other names: the Ballon d'Or. Perhaps the strongest image is still the simplest one. A ball at Luka Modric's feet. The surroundings changed. The hotel corridor became a training ground. The training ground became a stadium. Zadar became Zagreb. Zagreb became London. London became Madrid. And Madrid eventually led to Paris. But through every version of the story, the player remained recognizable. Small movements, early decisions, a glance over the shoulder, a touch away from pressure, and the ball moving where he had already decided it should go. Long before the golden trophy, that was the beginning. A boy. A ball. and somewhere to play.